And welcome back to a fresh episode of the Business Growth Show. I'm your host, Sam Dunning, co-owner over at webchoiceuk.com. And today I'm joined by returning guest, Danny Levy. Danny is the Managing Director of WBR, the APAC Region. He's also host and founder of the Digital Transformation and Leadership Podcast. Danny, welcome back to the show, Squire. How are you doing?
Yes, I'm good. How are you?
All good on this end, man. All
Yeah.
good. And looking forward to today's topic. We're going to talk all about how you can get the right things done to keep your business growing. I think it's something probably a lot of us, especially me, struggle with when it comes to faffing around, procrastinating, kind of putting those important tasks to one side and just thinking I'd rather mess about on LinkedIn or Facebook, or I'd rather send this email, or I'd rather check this first, or rather manage a project, putting everything aside rather than things that actually are going to move the needle and grow revenue, grow your business. So I think it's going to be useful for me and everyone tuning in. So yeah, love to jump straight in. And perhaps before we kind of talk, because I know you've got three main segments we want to split this up to, but perhaps before we get to that, perhaps we should just start with a teed up question. Why is it so important that we need to kind of get the right things done and manage our time?
I think it's one of the most important things you can do, no matter what level of the organization you're in. So whether you're kind of an entry-level person, maybe mid-level, at the top of the organization, I think always thinking around what are the things that I really need to be doing in the week, in the month, in the quarter, that are actually going to move the needle, and what are the things that only I can do, and what's the stuff that actually I don't need to be doing, and what can I delegate? So I think that's why it's so important. And we all have the same amount of time in the day and in the week, but I always say not all time is created equal.
I like that. It's amazing how sometimes I'm guilty of it all the time. You can just faff around with bits and pieces, don't know where the time's gone. It's already lunchtime, and then you realize, well, I haven't actually got in my list kind of anything I actually wanted to get done, and then you're panicking in the afternoon because you've just been messing around all morning.
Yeah, we always we tend to kind of overestimate, I think, how much time things take. So we might schedule a quick meeting catch up, for example, invite 2 or 3 people along to the meeting. We think it's going to take 20 minutes and it ends up taking an hour. And then all of a sudden you're chasing your tail for the rest of the day. And I always think the podcast is a good example as well, because when you get people onto the podcast, a lot of the time, if someone hasn't done a podcast before, they think that they're going to need 15, 20 questions to fill an hour. But in reality, all you need is a few points, and the conversation can quickly flow and get away from you. I'd always say over allocate your time, because things tend to take a lot longer than you think they will.
That's a great tip. Well, let's jump straight into it. How can we maximize our time? How can we ensure that we are getting the most bang for our buck when it comes to our time and structure and managing our days?
Yeah, so like you said, thanks, Sam. So I've got 3 points I'll talk around, just around kind of how you can get the right things done. You want to be the kind of most impactful person you can be in work. And these are just 3 points that have helped me in my career. So I just wanted to share. So the first one is around how you can get the most out of your time. So I think we started to touch on it there a bit. Right. But like I said, I mean, we've all got the same amount of hours in the day, in the week. One thing you can do just to get a handle on your time is to try and track it. So you might want to take kind of 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and just plot out where you spend your time to the closest 15 minutes, and be as honest as possible with yourself. Note it down. It doesn't have to be complicated. You can put it into an Excel. And what often happens is the results can be quite surprising, because you might schedule in your calendar that you're going to be spending 90 minutes on this really important piece of work, this deep focus, or you're going to be in a meeting. But what often happens is, over a period of time, you tend to gravitate towards things that you enjoy doing rather than what you need to be doing. Or like you said before, you jump off your kind of work that you've got to be doing. You're on LinkedIn, you're applying to a DM, or
that's the danger of 2 screens. You've got work on one side, you've got LinkedIn on the other.
That's it. Very, very difficult, very difficult. And if you go beyond 2 screens, because a lot of people have 2 monitors, they've got a phone, they've got other distractions at home. So if you do this exercise, the results can be quite surprising. And you might find that you're actually spending your time on stuff that isn't really that important. That's what I found when I did the exercise. So I was spending my time on a lot of activities where actually I could train up, or I could get other people in the team to do them as well, or close to as well as me.
Okay.
And I could then delegate those activities. I wouldn't need to do them anymore. And that would then free me up to, again, like I said before, just to work on stuff that only I can do, because that's really where you want to be spending most of your time. Future opportunities, things that are going to move the needle that only you can do. So it's a really good activity to do, just to kind of track your time in the beginning.
Really
So
like
say,
that.
yeah.
How long did you say that we should do that? And have you got any tips around kind of what we should measure? Did you say every 15 minutes you should kind of make a note in a Excel sheet or a doc?
Yeah, just an Excel or a doc.
This is what I've done. And
just to the closest 15 minutes. I mean, generally for about a 6-week period.
Yeah.
But if you do it for a 4-week period, that's also fine. And just see how you get on. I mean, and you can review that at the end of each week, because what happens is you might plan out your calendar for the following week and it might look great on paper, but in reality, that's just not how you're spending your time. So if you do this exercise, actually, it'll make you quite self-aware of what you are doing and what you're not doing, and then kind of be able to reorganize and prioritize based on that.
I already know if I start this, there's gonna be some worrying results. It'll be like send email, manage project, tell dog to shut up, check LinkedIn, send email.
The important thing is that is that you are honest with yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, and only you really need to look at it as well, right? You don't need to share that with all your colleagues and friends, but you need to look at it, and then you could share it with your manager and discuss that, and your manager could help you kind of get back on track. But they don't have to. And it just again kind of lets you kind of be a more impactful person, as I mentioned in the beginning. That's a really, really good exercise.
It is. What I like about it is it's universal, right? Because it doesn't apply to sales, marketing, leadership, whatever, because everyone, well, not everyone, but most people are probably guilty of procrastinating or doing things that they don't necessarily need to do. And like you mentioned just then, focus on kind of what you can only do, what you're going to do best, and outsource the rest, as the old saying goes. So really, really like that. And I suppose, did it happen with you that kind of a few days in you thought, I can cut this out, and then as time went on, you kind of sharpened up your time and realized kind of what you could do well, what you could allocate to other people, and just got, I guess, better and better use of your time?
That's it, yeah. And you'll find that you're actually spending your time on a lot of things that aren't even in your calendar. So it might be, proofing documentation or reviewing agendas. A lot of the time what happens to me is that I'll get work that will just kind of get put on my plate during the day. Yeah. And again, you can do it. I mean, your schedule should be flexible. You should be able to move things around. Mm-hmm. But the core activities, the stuff that you really need to be focusing on, or the essential meetings, that's kind of non-negotiable. So again, by doing this exercise, you can also see how reactive you are. So if you're a kind of super reactive person that says yes to everything, and we'll come to this later, but if you say yes to everything, or just kind of trying to put out fires or deal with urgent stuff or please people, a lot of people want to please everyone else, right? So, okay, I've got this request from this department. They say it's urgent, I must do it now. And again, by doing this exercise, you can see how much stuff you're putting in and how that's actually potentially holding you back.
Yeah. That's the trouble, isn't it? Sometimes in the heat of the moment, it's really easy to react to emails that are coming, tasks that are coming in. Even if you've got this high priority task, you've got to get done. Is that something you want to talk about now, Danny, or is there a bit more we need to chat about in terms of kind of managing time? And
well, I've got a few more points. So, I was just going to say, so one good thing to ask yourself when you get a request is, what would happen if I didn't do this? And which of these activities could be better done by somebody else? So I would always try and ask yourself those two questions. Yeah. When you are plotting out work for the week, when urgent requests are coming in, or just requests in general. And the worst way to allocate your time, which I popped this on LinkedIn yesterday, is in 15-minute blocks. So when you're allocating your time, you really need to avoid putting in anything to work on anything for 15 minutes. Or if you're working on something and a request comes in, if you can't do it then and there, and by then and there I mean like if you can't actually deal with it within kind of 60 to 90 seconds, you should be kind of plotting that out for the next week, or putting that into your schedule to plan out at a later date. You don't want to jump off things that need your full attention and onto other work. Or you're just putting your schedule together and you're under allocating time that you need for things. So you're only plotting, say, 15 to 30 minutes for something that actually is going to take you an hour and a half, 2 hours. That, again, is a really good way to get very stressed out. And, you know, find that you're working into the evenings, or you haven't finished all the work for the week. And then you end the week or the day feeling miserable. Mm-hmm. So don't do that. And the last thing just around time, I always say is get really comfortable saying no to requests. So most of the time, internal requests are non-urgent, but they'll seem urgent in the moment.
Yep.
So people will ask you to do things. And what I always do, and I recommend this to other people, is to kind of push back in a nice way and say, you know, at the moment, I'm really busy. I'm working on something, but I can get to this at 4 o'clock today, or I could get to this at 2 o'clock tomorrow. And what often happens is when you push back like that, the person goes away and actually solves it themselves. So you don't need to work on it at all. It might not happen. You might have to work on it later. But that's just a really good way to kind of make sure that your own work gets done, and you're kind of pushing back in a nice way. And you are saying that you'll get to it. It's not that it's not important. It's just that you can't get to it in that moment. So kind of get comfortable saying no. The worst thing you can do is say yes to everything. Then everyone gets used to you saying yes to everything. And what happens is they'll just push more and more work onto your plate, and you'll never be able to focus on your own key activities.
Yeah.
And for external requests, the last thing. So, for example, things like today, right? You said, would you come on the podcast? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll come on the podcast. And it's great to be invited on. And I will say yes to some opportunities. But to be honest with you, I say no to about 95% of external requests. And that's just because it's very tempting to say yes to things. It could look like a great opportunity. You know, you can be on a podcast or speak on a webinar, go to an event, have lunch with somebody. But again, just make sure that by saying yes to things, you're not pulling yourself away from your core activities, your key priorities, what's actually going to move the needle and what you're accountable for. Because again, if you say yes to too many things that look great on the surface without going too deep, or you just want to say yes, you know, again, at the end of the week, at the end of the day, you're going to feel really stressed out because you haven't done what you're accountable for. And your line manager, whoever that is, isn't really going to care if you're on a podcast or not. They're just going to care, have you done what you're accountable for in the week?
Exactly. Some great points. Yeah. So kind of tracking back a bit to the second point, understanding kind of which can be done better by someone else. So essentially we're saying if the job can be done in 60 to 90 seconds, just do it there and then. Otherwise, if it's going to take a bit more of your time, basically plan out when makes sense to do it in your calendar, book some time in the future rather than faffing around, taking your time away from something you need to get done that's perhaps high priority now and distracting yourself. Just plan it in advance.
Yeah. Cool. I'm going to go through that in the next point, but yeah, there's something I do in terms of how I allocate that and how I plan that out for the following week.
Awesome. Okay. And then getting comfortable saying no, this is something I've certainly learned the hard way. Because I remember when we started the podcast, I was stretching myself thin, trying to do kind of 3 or 4 episodes a week. And then it was affecting work, it was affecting sales. And I thought, there's no way I can go on. I'm going to keep it to kind of 1 or 2 max. And since then, I'm less stressed out. I can get more done and it just makes everything easier. And I was exactly the same on external requests, because I mean, us two being kind of quite active on LinkedIn and doing quite a lot of shows ourselves, we're fortunate enough that we regularly get invited onto other shows. But like you said, I had to almost become, I guess it's a bit selfish. I had to think, is this podcast actually going to help our business? Is it relevant to marketing? If it's not, I'm going to have to say thanks very much for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. But right now we're too busy with XYZ. Perhaps we can kind of chat again in the future or discuss something else. So understanding is
a really simple question is does this activity positively or have an impact on revenue? If it doesn't impact, if it doesn't impact revenue, then you should really question on why you're working on that activity.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that could apply to anything really, couldn't it? In terms of prioritization, I guess.
It really can, yeah. I mean, not everything will be very obvious, but it should have a knock-on effect or contribute indirectly, especially if you're not in a kind of sales role. But it's a great question to ask yourself, and then a lot of the time that will help you with your prioritization.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Cool. All right. Well, some great 3 points there. So coming up next, is that prioritization that we're talking about?
That's the one. That is the one. So if you get all those points down from the time management, getting the most out of your time, next comes how you can plan out your time for the following week. So hopefully you're self-aware, you've done that exercise, you know where you're spending your time, you've decided you're not going to allocate activities in 15-minute blocks, you're comfortable saying no. So you've got a really good handle on things. So the thing I always do and recommend other people do is start with your most important activity. So if you're in sales, you know that every day you need to be on the phone for at least, say, 90 minutes in the morning and 90 minutes in the afternoon. So that should be the first thing that gets allocated onto your calendar for the week, that prospecting time. And then around that prospecting time, you probably know you've got to kind of sort your data, make sure you've got your call list ready to go. You've got to work on admin and emails. You might need to update the CRM, respond to customer inquiries. You've got meetings that need to get plotted in. But the very first thing needs to go in is that prospecting time. Because if you don't allocate that prospecting time, you're not going to move the needle in terms of pipeline, moving deals forward, blowing deals out, getting new deals in there. And that's all the key stuff that when you kind of come to sit down with your manager, that they're going to be looking at. They're going to be going through your pipeline in the CRM, looking at which deals have moved forward, the forecast. So it's just having that awareness. And then around that kind of core time, you might want to over allocate time as well. I sometimes suggest people do that, but that is sacred. That time is absolutely sacred. So during that time, you should be switching off any distractions, any notifications, just to make sure that gets done. And as I say, then hopefully you can prioritize with the other activities we've done, what I've mentioned around those key activities. If you're like me and you have a lot going on, one thing I do, I'm not making too many sales calls these days, but one thing I do is I plan my week out by themes. So I find this quite helpful because I'm in a leadership role. So for me, I have a lot of one-to-one meetings and a lot of team meetings in the week. So what I find helpful is I only schedule the meetings and the one-to-ones on certain days. So, for example, on Wednesdays and Fridays, I have the most of my team meetings. So I know on those days I can, talk to people, come up with strategy, have one-to-ones. It's a lot of talking and back and forth. I'm actually a little bit more introverted, so I find these days more tiring. So I find it better just to get them out the way in one go. And then on other days, I have my kind of deep focus days, my knowledge work days. And on these days, so again, that would be for me kind of Monday and Thursdays generally. These are days I can plot out kind of work or scheduling or strategy documents I need to work on that will take me several hours. And I know during these days, it's unlikely that I'm going to have to get on a call, so I can really focus. And then on Tuesdays, I'll schedule kind of external client conversations, a podcast, any opportunities I've got that are external. And planning out the week like that just helps you kind of allocate activities. Also, for me personally, lowers my stress because when I look across the week, I know which days to kind of expect things. And I'm quite structured like that. So that works really well for me. And then the last thing you might want to consider is when you're at your most productive. So generally, a lot of people are better in the morning.
Sure.
So if you're better in the morning, you're kind of firing on all cylinders, you've had your coffee, get the worst activity out of the way first. I think you put that up on LinkedIn yesterday on the post I did. But, get the most difficult, most important things out of the way first. And then also, if you've got to work on a document that's going to take up, a lot of your thought process and take you quite a bit of time, it's better to put that first thing in the morning. If you're a morning person, get that out of the way. Don't schedule it, at 2 p.m. after you've been out for a huge slap up lunch, and then I think you fall asleep at your desk. Yeah. So again, that's really important. And then what I always recommend is, if you're just doing this for the first time and you're not sure that you're actually planning out your week in the right way, something simple that you can do is just take a print screen of your calendar once you've plotted everything out, and just show that to your manager, to your line manager, and just get their blessing that actually, you're prioritized in the right way, that you're working on all the right stuff. By doing that, it lowers your stress levels. You've planned out things correctly. And if you haven't, they can help you reorganize. And they might actually, what you might find is that actually you might be working on things over stuff that's a higher priority that actually the manager can do for you. They can take that off your plate. So that's a really good activity. And then the very last,
before you get to that,
what
that's okay if you're a rep and you've got a manager. What if you're a business owner? Is it just learn by testing, learn what works, what doesn't? Or if you're in a leadership position and you're perhaps top of the food chain, that's not the best way of putting it, so excuse me. But let's say you are running the business, you're running a leadership team. What do you do then? Do you just kind of follow these best practices, then test what works and kind of build a schedule around kind of what you feel's getting results?
Generally in a lot of companies, you would have probably anyway risen up the ranks, I guess. So you might have already done this as you were moving up. Sure. Hopefully you're also helping your team to do this. So you can kind of be discussing with them, looking at their schedules. That helps you see that everyone's on track. Yeah. If you're a very small company, say there's only one or two of you, just show it to your co-founder or who the other manager is and just discuss it. Sure. There's always somebody you can normally bounce it off. And if there really, really isn't, just the old trial and error. You'll quickly see if you're spending your time on the right things or not.
Makes sense. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Sweet.
I think I had one more point there. You just cut me off just short under prioritization. The last thing I was going to say was when you're planning out your week, you won't be able to get to everything. It just won't happen. And there'll be lots of things that pop up during the week, like we said before, that you can't deal with instantly. You can't fit it in. It's important. It's not urgent. That's always where you should be spending the bulk of your time, on things that are important, not urgent. I just have a calendar block on a Friday, which is an hour, where I plan out the following week, and I just drag everything into that calendar reminder that I can't get to. And then when you come to plot out your next week, you open that up and all the things that have come up are in there. And then you can include that in next week's planning.
I want to dive into a couple of those points in a bit more detail. What's your thoughts on planning a week out on a Sunday or a weekend in general? Like your weekend?
I think that's fine. I personally don't work at the weekends, try to avoid it. But you could do this activity on a Sunday. If you find that you're better logging in on a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday evening when the kids have gone to bed, then you can look at the calendar invite on the Sunday and then plot out the following week. I try and do it on a Friday around 4 to 5 o'clock my time, and then just plot out the following week there.
Yeah, I guess it's about what works for you. The reason I ask is because that's where I do it. Is some afternoons I have to finish a bit early with the little one, so it makes sense. But I guess it's ultimately about, like you say, whether it works for you doing it on a Friday because you want to.
There's no right or wrong. As long as you're getting it in there and it works for you, then do it your way.
Nice. Cool. So some great stuff there in terms of, like, if you're a sales rep, making sure you do, I guess, the most painful thing first, really, which is if you're prospecting, that might be cold calling, cold emailing, starting some new conversations, getting some sales pipeline in your CRM. And then, I've got an example of this yesterday. There was an audit that I was putting off and off and off, needed to do this week. Thought, right, that's it. I'm going to do it first thing Monday morning. Took me a couple hours to get done, do the video recording, do the documentation. But once I'd done it, I thought, thank God that's done. I feel so much better now. I can just crack on with the other kind of sales tasks, project management tasks, website tasks I need to do. Just was on a high. Whereas I'd been dreading it for so long. got it done. It was like, it wasn't that bad. It was actually easy. It's just weird how your mind plays these tricks on you, isn't it? And you want to put it off and off and off. It's just a funny old thing.
I obviously have the luxury of working for a company where these activities are managed by different departments, but you're a small business owner and you've got to take this on yourself.
That's it. And then again, I suppose it's knowing what your teammates can help you out with and what is going to be the best use of your own time and putting that into thinking too.
That's it. I mean, you should always know the strengths of the team, and then you should hopefully play to those strengths and be able to delegate the activities that you know people can do well or do better than you.
Yeah. Cool. Like it. And I think we're going to wrap up with just some tips you've got for us in terms of running effective meetings.
Yeah, so the last thing that I think takes up a lot of time in the week, huge amount of time, is meetings. Definitely internal meetings, external meetings as well, but internal meetings are the main ones. Most meetings are a complete waste of time, I think. They're just, a lot of them just don't need to happen. So before the meeting even starts, I'd always ask yourself if you really need to have it. And the more people in the meeting, the bigger time investment it is for the company. So you might just schedule a 1 hour meeting, but if there's 5 people in that meeting, it's 5 hours because there's 5 people there. So it's a big time investment. So just make sure it's really needed. And generally you want to know when you have a meeting, it's like, do you need to make a decision on something? Do you need to make sure that you're on the right track? Are you checking back in? If you're not, and it's not a one-to-one, then really question whether you're having the meeting. A lot of meetings could just be a phone call or an email.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, so
definitely agree. It's like all these kind of spam LinkedIn or emails you get just saying, can we hop on a 60-minute call with no context? But is there a checklist that you've got, Danny, or something you run to say whether a meeting, a Zoom call, a phone call is actually worth setting up or not?
Well, with an external meeting, especially if it's a sales meeting, I think being able to disqualify before you go into the call, into the meeting is always really important, especially if it's an inbound inquiry. You'll get a lot of people inbound that don't really know what they want. They don't know about your services. They don't know how much you charge. So I think being armed with kind of just a key value proposition and checklist of what to expect if they get in a call with you or on a meeting, so you can disqualify without having to do that on a call. That will save you a ton of time. And internally, like I said, I think if you're going to have a meeting, it's because you want to make a decision on something, or you're moving in a new direction, or you just need to inform people internally on a new update, a new strategy, a new change of direction. If these things aren't clear, then again, just question the need to have the meeting. And if you do decide you want to have a meeting, what I would always say is make sure there's an agenda. Definitely. Even if there's if it's a one-to-one, still have an agenda. If it's a group meeting, have an agenda, and just share the agenda in advance. You want to get everyone on the same page. And a lot of the time in the agenda, there's kind of key points and numbers that can be included in the agenda ahead of the meeting. Because often what happens is there's no agenda, you go into the meeting and then everyone's asking for all this key data for the first 20 minutes of the meeting. So that actually prevents you from actually being able to have the strategy discussion that you want. So just make sure you've got all of that information up front. So that when you get into the meeting, the key thing in the meeting is that everyone can voice their opinion. You can understand where all the different departments are coming from. And if there's any kind of problems or challenges, you can collaboratively discuss how you're going to overcome those.
Yeah, good stuff. So, I like the one on inbound sales leads, because like you said, I've been guilty of that in the past, just getting an inquiry, doesn't matter where it's from, a phone call, email, through the website or through LinkedIn or through any other channel. And they say, look, can we get on a call? But quite a large percentage of the time, that call won't be worth your time, because like you say, the prospect might not be qualified to work with you, or vice versa. So just asking them a few questions, i.e., can you give me a snapshot of exactly what you're looking for? Can you give me an idea of the budget, the timeline? And that way you've got a few sentences. And it might be that they're budget's too low or their project isn't something you can help with, and that just saves you 30, 40, 50 minutes on a call. Just learn the hard way on that. And
when I first started out in sales, it's so exciting when you get an inbound lead.
Yeah,
you're like, got a lead, great. And you'll get on that call, and you don't disqualify early, you don't qualify, and you go through your entire sales process for 40 minutes, 50 minutes, like you said, and then at the end you realize it's not a fit, and they don't have the money, and they're not the decision maker. And you've wasted a huge chunk of your day where you could have been prospecting or talking to people that are a fit. So you've got to be very careful about that.
Exactly. Yeah, jumping on a call for cool's sake is something I'm definitely against. I mean, obviously, if they're a good fit, then great. If not, then perhaps reconsider it. And finally, the agenda, very, very good. Again, I've been in the past. It's a similar kind of thing. You jump on calls, and especially if doesn't matter if it's internal or external, everyone wants to have their own say and kind of voice their opinion. Whereas if you, like you quite rightly said, put in a kind of few key bullet points of what you're going to discuss, how long the meeting is going to be, and then before you can perhaps set up an email thread saying, can everyone chime in with what they want to cover on this meeting? If you don't put it by this date, then I'll assume you don't want to cover anything, which is good because then they're too late to get their 2 pence in.
Precisely.
And then you can keep it to a set amount of time and make sure everything's covered rather than wasting everyone's time and faffing about all day.
And then the other thing with the meetings as well is like, just make sure that you start and end on time. Too many meetings start late, then they run late, then everyone else's day's skewed. You're backtracking on time. So try and start and end on time. Not all meetings need to be an hour. So, we have a stand-up meeting with some of the department heads on a Monday morning, first thing. That meeting's 15 minutes.
Nice.
Just key updates, what's happening in the week, what forecasts are out there. So, make sure that you don't always need to schedule an hour. That just seems to be the default. Oh, we've got a meeting, it needs to be an hour. Not the case. Just invite the people that need to be there. Again, often meetings end up with people there that just don't need to be there. They're not contributing. They're not saying anything. They're not adding any value. So think long and hard before you invite people because, they've got important things to be getting on with. And if you're on the receiving end of one of these invites and you think, why am I invited to this meeting? Say no. Don't just go along to the meeting. Do question it, even if it's someone more senior than you. And if you're running a meeting, always make it a conversation. Nobody wants to be in meetings where it's just the most senior person kind of turning it into a monologue with everyone. The whole point of a meeting is to get everyone else's opinion. So, get everyone else's opinion. And then at the end, you've got all the information you need to come back and offer your own advice. And then the last thing is just take notes. Make sure you take notes or someone in the meeting takes notes. Make sure there's action points with the person that they're assigned to. If there's no notes and action points, the meeting may as well never have happened. And then make sure you follow up afterwards, either in the next meeting or if there is no other meeting, make sure you follow up with the people it's been assigned to make sure it's been done. That's the whole point of a meeting.
Yeah. The fruit is in the follow up and all that.
That's it.
Good stuff.
And they're the points. They're the 3 points.
I think we've covered it all nicely. Really, really appreciate the breakdown. Enjoyed the conversation. And as always, thanks very much for coming on. And
pleasure. Thank you for having me back.
Cheers, sir. And with that, please do tell everyone more about how they can learn from you, connect with you, a bit about your podcast, a bit about the business, and the best way to get in touch.
Easiest way to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn. I post most days. As you can imagine from this podcast, I'm fairly organized with my time. So you might see me pop up in the middle of the day, my time in Singapore, and at the end of the day. But if you send me a DM, I'll get back in touch with you. And I host a podcast. I run a podcast called Digital Transformation and Leadership. And if you're listening to this, you can find it on all the same streaming services. Be really cool if you check that out.
Nice one, dude. Thanks again.
Thanks, Sam.
Cool. And if you enjoyed the show, as always, be sure to hit that subscribe button. We interview business leaders each and every week and provide actionable tips across marketing, sales, and growing your sales revenue. And with that, we should catch you on the next one.